I never planned to sit across from a man everyone else whispered about. For most of my life, I was the girl who kept her head down, counted tips, and prayed trouble would pass my door. The night everything changed, I was balancing a silver tray full of whiskey glasses, trying not to let my hands shake. The restaurant lights were dim and golden, the kind that make everything look softer than it really is, but nothing felt soft. Not the stares, not the tension, not the knot inside my chest that had been growing since the moment my brother disappeared 2 weeks earlier. "Table D's, Elena," my manager whispered, straightening my black shirt like I was a child. "Be careful, and don't talk unless they ask you. You remember what I told you, she." I swallowed, my throat was dry. "Only answer, never ask," I repeated. He nodded once, but his eyes said more. Fear, pity, a silent warning, do not make a mistake tonight. The tray felt heavier with every step I took toward the private room at the back. That room had always been a rumor for the staff. We called it La Cuva, the cave. Important people went inside and came out either very rich, very pale, or never again. Tonight, for the first time since I started at the restaurant, the door was open. The first thing I noticed inside was the smoke, cigars thick and sweet hanging in the air. The second was the silence. 10 men sat around an oval table, all expensive suits and gold watches, but no one laughed, no one checked their phones. They just watched me come in like I was walking into a courtroom where the verdict was already decided. My pulse hammered in my ears. I focused on the glasses one at a time, placing them gently in front of each man. Don't look at their eyes, I told myself. Eyes read fear. Fear is weakness, and weak people didn't last very long around men like these. "Ella es la chica," a rough voice said in Spanish somewhere to my left. "Is she the girl?" I froze for half a second, then kept moving, pretending not to understand. But my Spanish was perfect. It always had been. My mother made sure of that before she died. "The interpreter," another man said in English, "for the shipment documents." Interpreter, I forced my face to stay neutral as I set down the last glass. So that was the lie my manager had sold them. That I was just a girl who knew enough languages to help with paperwork, not a sister trying to find out why her brother owed money to ghosts. "Leave the bottle," a man at the far end said. His voice was low, not loud like the others, but the room reacted as if he had shouted. Chairs straightened, cigars were lowered. Even the man who had been half smiling lost the expression in an instant. I had not seen him yet. I had saved him for last, maybe on purpose, maybe because I was scared to put a face to the stories. When I finally looked up, my breath caught. He wasn't what I expected. He didn't look like a movie villain or a monster. No visible scars, no blood on his hands, just a man in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, in a dark suit that fit like it had never belonged to anyone else. Black hair cut clean, a day's worth of beard. His tie was loosened like he had been at this table for hours. But it was his eyes that made my skin prickle. They were the kind of eyes that had watched too many people lie. Dark, sharp, intelligent, but tired, not sleep-tired, soul-tired. "Wine for me," he said softly, switching to Spanish. "I don't drink whiskey when I'm working." "Sí, señor," I answered automatically. His eyes flicked to my face when I spoke, just for a second. A quick, precise glance like he was counting my features, filing them away somewhere inside his head. "What's your name?" he asked. The man closest to him shifted in his chair. "Jefe, she's just." He lifted one hand and the man went silent. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my wrists. "Elena," I said quietly. "Mi llamo Elena." "Elena," he repeated, tasting the name like it was a wine he was deciding to buy or not. He tilted his head slightly. "From where?" "Aquí, born here," I said. "My family is from Jalisco." Something like recognition flashed in his eyes, but it was gone too fast for me to catch. "Good," he murmured. "Sit." The chair to his right scraped back as one of the men stood, almost too quickly. He did not argue, he didn't even look annoyed. He just moved aside, as if giving up a seat was nothing compared to refusing an order. I only serve," I started. "I'm not." "You translate," the boss said. "Your manager told me you're quick. I like quick. Sit." Every part of me wanted to run, but my brother's face rose in front of my eyes. The last time I saw him, he'd been standing in our small kitchen with a split lip, smiling like he wasn't afraid. "It's handled, Hermanita," he had said. "Just keep working, we'll be fine." 2 days later he was gone. 3 days after that, an envelope arrived at the restaurant with my name on it. No return address, no note, only a single sheet of paper with numbers that looked like debt and a message that sounded like a threat. Your brother is safe as long as the payments don't stop. The payments, that was why I was here. My knees felt weak as I sat down beside the boss. Up close, he smelled faintly of tobacco and something clean like pine or expensive soap, not too much cologne, no attempt to hide what he was. He slid a folder toward me with 2 fingers. English, Spanish, Russian, he said. You translate, you keep your mouth shut, and you walk out of here tonight with enough money to sleep without counting hours. Understood. It took me a moment to find my voice. Understood. His gaze lingered on me 1 second longer, searching, maybe, for something I didn't want him to find. Then he nodded once and turned back to the table. Entonces, he said to the others, the authority back in his voice so suddenly it made me understand why men with guns listened to him. Let's begin. The meeting started slowly, like a storm you can see gathering at the horizon. Numbers, locations, schedules, they spoke in half phrases and codes, never naming anything fully. I wrote, translated, my hand cramped around the pen. I forced myself to hear everything and show nothing. Fear had to be invisible if I wanted to leave with my life, and with answers. Once in the middle of an argument about delivery routes, a man at the far side of the table slammed his fist down, making the glasses jump. My body responded before my brain. I flinched hard, my shoulder knocking into the boss. His arm brushed mine. In that instant he turned sharp like he expected an attack. Then he saw me, wide-eyed, frozen, and something shifted in his expression. The harsh line of his jaw softened just a fraction. Tranquilla, he said under his breath, in a voice so low only I could hear, calm. No one had told me to be calm in weeks. People had told me to hurry, to pay, to work, to smile, but not to breathe. I let out a slow exhale I hadn't known I was holding. They fight, he added, barely moving his lips. They shout, but not tonight. Tonight no one dies, she. The words were simple, almost casual, but they hit me with full force. Not tonight, like it was normal on other nights that someone might not walk out. My fingers tightened around the pen. She, I whispered. He turned away as quickly as he'd turned toward me, his attention back on business, as if this man everyone feared hadn't just tried, in his own small way, to make a scared waitress feel safer at his table. Kindness behind power, I thought, then immediately pushed the thought away. Men like him did not do kindness, they made calculations. Hours slipped by, the air grew hotter, thicker, my back ached. Every time someone's voice rose, my hands trembled under the table. I kept my head down, my eyes on the papers, but I could feel his presence beside me like a shadow with a heartbeat. Somewhere between the end of one contract and the beginning of another, the boss leaned back in his chair. Break, he said. Chairs scraped, men stood. Some stepped outside to call, others to smoke. A few stayed, murmuring in low voices. The boss remained seated, rolling his empty wine glass between his fingers, lost in a thought I could not see. My throat burned. I hadn't had water since the shift began. I stood up carefully. I'll bring more. He looked at me, cutting me off without words. You're not staff in this room, he said quietly. Not tonight, sit, rest a moment. I didn't understand, but I work here. He held my gaze, something like impatience and curiosity mixing. How much do they pay you, Elena? The question felt like a trap. Enough. A corner of his mouth lifted, the ghost of a smile. You don't lie very well, enough means not even close. I looked down at my hands. The cheap watch on my wrist suddenly felt like a confession of everything I couldn't afford. It's what I have, I said softly. There was a pause, then the sound of his chair moving. For a second I thought I had offended him, that I had broken some invisible rule. But instead of standing up to leave, he rose just enough to pull off his suit jacket and drape it over the back of my chair. I stared at the fabric near my shoulder, confused. You're shaking, he said. It's cold. His tone was matter-of-fact, like this was purely practical, like he wasn't the most dangerous man in the building, putting his jacket on a waitress who didn't know how to keep her fear from showing. It's not cold, I blurted, then shut my mouth too late. His eyes flicked to my face. Then you're scared, he said, no accusation, just a statement. You should be, fear keeps you alive, panic gets you killed, learn the difference. The word slipped under my skin, fear keeps you alive, panic gets you killed. How many times had he learned that lesson? How many bodies had taught it to him? Before I could answer, the door opened and my manager appeared, face pale, eyes darting anywhere but at the boss. "Jefe," he stammered, "you need anything, more food, more." "We're fine," the boss said, not looking at him. My manager nodded too many times, then turned his attention to me. "Elena, the kitchen." "She stays," the boss interrupted. My manager's mouth snapped shut, the silence pressed down heavy. "Is there a problem?" the boss asked, his voice still calm but with a new edge that made the hairs on my arms rise. "No, senor," my manager said quickly. "Of course not, she stays as long as you need." He forced a small laugh. "She's good girl, hard worker." I felt my cheeks heat. Being spoken about like I wasn't in the room made me feel small, like furniture. But there was something else hiding under my embarrassment, the sharp, cold realization that a line had been drawn. I was no longer just a waitress who could sneak away and pretend none of this was real. I had been seen, chosen somehow by a man people crossed the street to avoid. My manager left with a bow that looked almost like fear. The door closed. The murmur of the restaurant outside became a distant hum. "Why are you here, Elena?" the boss asked suddenly. "Not here," he added, gesturing to the table. "Here in this world." His question hit a place I kept locked. I work," I said, my voice too thin. "I pay bills." "Bills," he repeated softly like the word amused him. "And your brother's debts, those are just bills too." My heart stopped, my fingers went numb. I hadn't told him about my brother. I hadn't told anyone here, not even my manager, why I had started begging for extra shifts. The envelope had been hidden in my locker. The fear had been hidden in my chest. Cold crawled up my spine. Slowly, I raised my eyes to his. "How do you?" I started. He didn't smile. "There is nothing that touches my money that I don't know about," he said simply. "Your brother borrowed from the wrong people, stupid, desperate, both, but loyal." He tilted his head. "You're paying for him, that makes you loyal too." Anger flared through my fear, surprising even me. "I'm paying because I don't want him dead," I snapped before I could stop myself. The room seemed to tilt. I waited for the shouting, the threat, the casual cruelty I had seen in other men with half his power. But it didn't come. Instead, he studied me, really studied me, as if I had just done something unexpected. "There it is," he murmured, "the spine." I blinked. "The what?" "The part of you that wants to fight, not beg," he said. "Don't lose it, Elena. This city eats people who only know how to say yes, sir, and please." He leaned back again, picking up his empty glass. "Your brother made a mess, maybe I can fix it." The words hung between us, impossible and dangerous. "Why?" I whispered before sense could drag the question back. He turned the glass slowly in his hand, watching the way the light caught on its edges. "Because sometimes," he said finally, "a man gets tired of cleaning up only his own sins." I didn't understand what that meant, not really, but something about the way he said it, quiet, heavy, like each word carried a memory, made my chest ache. The others began to drift back in, laughter forced, tension returning like a tide. The moment was over, papers shuffled, deals resumed. The boss put his jacket back on, the brief warmth of it disappearing from my shoulders. Hours later, when the last signature was made and the last smoke curled toward the ceiling, the room shifted into something else. Less business, more danger. The jokes got darker, the men looser. One of them, a tall man with a scar running from his ear to his collar, leaned toward me, his breath thick with alcohol. "You did well, Nina," he said in Spanish, smiling in a way that made my stomach twist. "Maybe next time you sit on my side of the table, eh?" My skin crawled. "I'm fine here, gracias," I replied, trying to keep my tone polite, non-confrontational. He smirked, reaching for my wrist. I wasn't asking. Before he could touch me, a hand closed around his wrist instead. "The boss." The change in the room was immediate. Laughter died mid-breath. Even the music from the main restaurant outside seemed to fade. "If you can't drink without forgetting whose house you're in," the boss said, his voice soft but lethal, "drink water." The man with the scar paled. "Jefe, I was just..." "You were just disrespecting my table." The boss released his wrist slowly, each finger unwrapping like a promise. "Apologize." The man looked at me, jaw tight. "Pardon," he muttered. I nodded, too stunned to speak. The boss waved his hand. "Go." Scarman left so fast his chair almost fell. For a heartbeat, the only sound in the room was the soft crackle of cigar ash. Then the boss turned to me, and his tone shifted again, not gentle but not cruel either. "Next time, Elena," he said, "you stand up before they touch you." His eyes held mine, unblinking. "You don't belong under anyone's hand, not even mine, understand?" My throat closed. "Yes," I breathed. He watched me a second longer, then pushed his chair back. The meeting was over. Men started to stand, collecting their phones, their guns, their secrets. The spell of the room began to break. "You'll get your envelope at the bar," he said, already turning away, "for tonight's work and for your brother." My chest tightened. "Thank you," I said, the words rushing out raw and honest. "Really, thank you." I wanted to say I was scared, that I didn't know how I had ended up here, that I wasn't sure if he was saving us or pulling us deeper into the dark. But all those sentences tangled together and died somewhere between my heart and my mouth. What came out instead was something else, something stupid, something my tired brain grabbed from years of watching customers and copying the way they spoke. "Thank you, darling," I whispered. The moment the word left my lips, I knew. The room froze. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. A glass stopped halfway to someone's mouth. Every eye in that private room turned to me at the exact same time, like they had all trained together their entire lives. "Darling." The word hung in the air like smoke. I felt my soul leave my body for a second, hovering somewhere above me, watching me destroy my own life with one accidental syllable. The man with the scar stared at me, stunned. My manager, who had slipped in at some point, went white as the tablecloth. And the boss? He did not move, he did not blink. He just stood there at the head of the table, every line of his body suddenly unreadable, his eyes fixed on me like he was seeing me for the first time. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. I opened my mouth to apologize, but no sound came out. The silence grew thicker, heavier, like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do to the girl who had just called the devil darling in his own house. He moved first. Not fast, not angry, just a small turn of his head, like he was shifting his attention from the papers to me. Somewhere down the table, one of the men choked on a nervous laugh, a sharp little sound that sliced through the silence. It died as soon as the boss's eyes found him. "You think it's funny?" he asked. His voice was soft, but the air in the room changed. The man who had almost laughed swallowed, the color draining from his face. "No, Jefe, I." The boss raised one hand, palm up, and the excuse shrank in the man's throat. "Nobody says a word," he murmured. "Not about her, not about that word." His gaze came back to me. I wanted to disappear into the chair. Heat burned the back of my neck. My tongue felt too big in my mouth. "I'm sorry," I managed, the words scraping out of me. "I didn't mean, I was tired and—" "Don't move," he said. My body obeyed before my brain did. I sat there, every muscle tight, as he stepped away from the head of the table. The sound of his shoes on the floor was the only sound in the room. No one else breathed loud enough to be heard. He stopped beside me. Up close, he didn't look furious. He looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper, the shadows under them darker. He studied my face the way a man studies a cracked glass, deciding if it will hold or break in his hand. "Say it again," he said quietly, "what you just called me." My heart almost stopped. I can't," I whispered. His jaw flexed once. "You call a man something like that in front of his enemies, you should be brave enough to repeat it." Enemies, the word made my skin crawl. I forced my lips to move. "Darling," I whispered, so soft I wasn't sure anyone else heard. But they did, I could feel it. The boss's eyes closed for a second. When he opened them, there was something there I hadn't seen before, not anger, not amusement. Pain, old, buried, fought against pain. "The last woman who called me that," he said, still looking at me but talking to the room, "is in the ground because of what happens at this table." Nobody shifted, nobody glanced at anyone else. The smoke hung still in the air like it was afraid to move. "So if any of you," he went on, his voice dropping even lower, "ever repeat that word with my name in it, even as a joke," he tilted his head slightly toward the man who had almost laughed, "I will make sure you join her, slowly, entendido." "She, Jefe," came the chorus all at once, like a prayer and a promise. My chest tightened. I hadn't known I could feel worse than I already did, but now guilt climbed up my throat and sat there heavy. I had stepped on a grave I couldn't see. He turned his face back to me, close enough that I could see the tiny scar near his left eyebrow, a thin white line, almost invisible. "You," he said quietly, "didn't know." A tear I hadn't meant to show slipped hot down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. My hands were clenched in my lap, fingers digging into my own skin. "I'm sorry," I whispered again, useless words, too small for what I had just touched inside him. "Be careful, Elena," he told me, his tone softer than I had heard it all night. "There are parts of a man you can't touch for free, not with your hands, not with your tongue." A tiny pause, "Not even by accident." I nodded because I couldn't speak. He straightened, the moment folding in on itself. When he turned back to the table, the armor slid over him again. The tired man with the old grief vanished, replaced by the boss everyone feared. "La reunión terminó," he said simply. "The meeting is over." Chairs scraped back, no one joked now, no one lingered. They left in pairs and groups, quiet, eyes careful not to meet mine for too long. The man with the scar kept his gaze fixed on the floor as he passed me, rubbing his wrist like he could still feel where the boss had grabbed him. My manager hovered near the door, looking like he wanted to both drag me out and pretend he didn't know me. He flinched when the boss called his name. "La chica," the boss said, "her pay." "Sí, señor," my manager croaked. "En el bar como siempre, we prepared." "Double it," the boss cut in. My manager blinked. "Double." The boss's eyes were on the papers in front of him, but his voice left no space for confusion. "She worked more than you pay her for, and she kept her head when some of you didn't. Double in cash." My manager nodded so hard I thought his neck would snap. "She, yes, of course, right away." The boss gathered the folders, tapping their edges against the table until they were perfectly aligned. Then, without looking at anyone, he added, almost as an afterthought, "From tonight forward, she's under my protection while she wears your uniform. If something happens to her in this place, I won't ask who. I'll just start with you." My manager made a sound that might have been agreement, might have been fear. "Under my protection." The words coiled around my ribs tight. Protection in his mouth didn't sound like safety, it sounded like a lock. He walked toward the door. As he passed me, he paused for the briefest moment, just enough to lean down so only I could hear. "If you want to thank me," he murmured, "learn to survive. Don't throw that word around again, not with me, not with any man like me." I swallowed. How should I call you then?" I asked, surprising myself. His eyes flicked to mine. For the first time, there was a hint of something almost like humor in them. "By my name," he said, "it's Andres." And then he was gone, through the door, swallowed by the corridor and the men who followed him like a moving wall. My knees nearly gave out when the door clicked shut. The room felt bigger without him and somehow colder. My manager rushed to my side, his breath fast and sour. "Are you crazy?" he hissed in Spanish. "Darling, to him you want to die young." "I didn't mean," I started. "Nobody ever means it," he snapped, "and still people disappear." His anger broke suddenly, exhaustion leaking through. He looked at me, really looked, and shook his head. "Go to the bar," he sighed. "Take your envelope and go home. Don't come back tomorrow if you don't want. I'll tell them you're sick." I nodded, my throat too tight, and walked out past the long table where men had just decided the fate of things I didn't understand. The restaurant outside felt like another planet. Soft music, couples laughing quietly, the clink of plates, the smell of garlic and butter. No one out here knew what kind of conversations bled through the walls behind them. At the bar, the bartender slid a thick envelope across the counter without a word. When I reached for it, he held on a second longer. "Cuidate," he muttered, "take care of yourself." I tucked the envelope inside my jacket. The walk home felt longer than usual. The city was almost empty, the kind of late hour where the only people on the street are too drunk, too tired, or up to something they can't talk about. Neon from the tienda signs painted the sidewalk in red and green. Halfway to my building, a black car cruised past, windows tinted so dark they were like mirrors. It slowed when it drew level with me. My heart leaped up into my throat. I kept walking, trying not to look, every nerve in my back waiting for the window to roll down, for someone to call my name. It didn't. The car rolled forward again, picking up speed, disappearing at the next corner like a shadow, deciding I wasn't worth following. Inside my apartment, the silence roared. No TV, no music, just the small hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing. I sat at the tiny kitchen table and opened the envelope with shaking hands. Cash spilled out, so much more than one night's tips that for a second my brain refused to count. I forced myself. 1, 2, 3, I got to the total and stopped, stunned. He hadn't just doubled my pay, he had added enough to cover the next payment on my brother's debt. There was something else too. A small cream-colored card, thick and smooth, like the kind rich people use for invitations. On it, in neat black ink, there was a single phone number. No name, no logo, just 10 digits and 2 words, written in Spanish in a hand that was too precise to be anyone else's. Llama C.A.'s grave. Call if it's serious. My chest tightened. I read the words again and again until they blurred. Call who? The devil, my brother's savior, the man whose eyes had gone distant when I touched the ghost of the only woman who ever called him darling. My old cracked phone sat on the table, screen dark, the plastic case held together with tape. I set the card beside it. For a moment I imagined myself pressing the numbers. What would I even say? Hi, it's the waitress who almost died saying the wrong word. Thank you for the money. Are you going to own my soul now, or do I get to keep part of it? A bitter laugh escaped me, half sob, half hysteria. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes until stars exploded behind my eyelids. A noise snapped me back. 3 hard knocks at the door. I froze. Midnight had already passed. No one visited me this late. No neighbors, no friends. The building held its breath with me. Another knock, louder, then a voice, low and urgent, on the other side of the thin wood. Elena, abrimmed, soy yo. My heart stopped. My brother. His voice sounded older through the door, rougher, but it was his. My hand shook as I slid back the cheap chain and turned the lock. The door stuck for a second, swollen from humidity, then gave way. I pulled it open. He stood there in the dim hallway, framed by the flickering light bulb that never worked right. Same brown eyes, same stubborn jaw, but thinner. Bruises bloomed under his cheekbone, yellow and purple like storm clouds. There was a split on his eyebrow, half healed, and his knuckles were raw. Dios mío, I breathed. Mateo. He smiled, weak, the old crooked grin that had always made him look like a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Hola, hermanita. Then his knees buckled. I grabbed him before he hit the floor, his weight heavy against me. He smelled like sweat, cheap cologne, and antiseptic. It took everything in me to drag him inside and kick the door shut with my foot. Sit, I ordered, pushing him into the chair I had just left. Don't move. Oi, since when are you the boss? He tried to joke, wincing when he touched his side. Something about the way he held himself screamed pain. Since you decided to disappear, I snapped, tears already burning my eyes. Where have you been? They said, I thought. My voice broke, the questions tumbled over each other, turning into a sound like choking. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and rough. I know, he said softly, I'm sorry. Sorry, the word sounded too small coming from his mouth, like an empty envelope. I pulled away and grabbed the first aid kit from the cabinet above the sink. My hands remembered the movements without thinking: cotton, alcohol, bandages. We had done this dance before, after street fights, after stupid nights with the wrong crowd, but this felt different, deeper, darker. Who did this? I asked, cleaning a cut on his jaw that was already closing. He hissed but stayed still. People, he muttered, the kind that make other people disappear. I pressed harder than I needed to. He grimaced. Don't start lying now, I warned. He sighed, the sound heavy. I wasn't lying, just editing. I threw the cotton in the trash, harder than necessary. Where were you, Mateo? He leaned back in the chair, eyes tracing the cracked ceiling for a moment, as if the answer might be written there. They grabbed me, he said finally, outside the mechanics 2 weeks ago, van bag over the head, all the clichés. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. I woke up in a basement that smelled like bleach and fear, different guys than the ones I owed first, more serious, less chatty. My stomach turned. They hurt you. You see me, no? He lifted his shirt slightly and I sucked in a breath. Bruises marred his ribs, dark and ugly, a map of every question they had asked him. I told you to stop, I whispered. I told you those loans weren't normal. I took them for us, he shot back, then winced immediately, regret flashing across his face. For Mama's hospital, for the rent, for I thought I could flip the money, buy, sell, make it back before anyone noticed. And I asked bitterly, did you flip it? Are we rich now? He looked at me, eyes shining. I was stupid. I sat down opposite him, my anger and my fear folding into each other until I couldn't tell them apart. How did you get out? I asked. They just let you go. He shook his head slowly. Tonight the door opened, different man, suit, nice watch. He didn't hit, didn't shout, just looked at me and said, "You're Matteo Rivera." I said yes. He took out a cigarette, lit it and told me, "Your debt is paid, walk out, go home. You and your sister don't owe us anything now, not a peso. If anyone touches you again over this, they answer to Andres." The room tilted. How do you know that name? I breathed. He frowned. What name? Andres. He blinked. I just told you, that's what the man said. Andres, you know him. I leaned back, staring at the cream-colored card still on the table with its neat black ink. Lama CE's grave. Yes, I whispered, I think I do. Matteo followed my gaze. What is that? Nothing, I lied automatically, sliding the card closer to me as if distance could hide it. He smirked weakly. You've never been good at lying, Eli, worse than me, and I'm terrible. I almost laughed, a short, broken sound. You're the worst. He sobered. How deep are you in this? His question hit hard. I thought of the restaurant, the cave room, the cigars, the folder under my hand, the boss's jacket around my shoulders, the way his eyes had changed when I had said that stupid word. I don't know, I admitted. Too deep for a waitress, not deep enough for whatever they are. He looked at me, really looked, like he was trying to see if I was still his little sister, or if the night had carved someone else into my skin. I saw him, I said quietly. Andres, tonight at work. Matteo's eyes widened. He came to the restaurant. I was in the room, I said. The room you're not supposed to talk about. They needed an interpreter. Our manager volunteered me. His head dropped into his hands. Idiota, he muttered at the ceiling, but this time the insult wasn't for me. El maldito gerente. He paid me, I went on, ignoring the sting of the word. More than the restaurant ever did, enough to cover the next payment, enough to, my gaze drifted back to my brother's bruises, enough to make me wonder what he wants. Men like him never give without wanting something, Matteo said grimly. They don't know how. I know, my voice came out small. Silence fell between us. The cheap clock on the wall ticked too loud. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far away, moving in and out of earshot like a warning that had gotten lost on the wrong street. He could have killed you, Matteo said slowly, for being in that room, for knowing numbers, faces, places, for whatever you did. His eyes narrowed. What did you do, Elena? My cheeks burned. I called him darling, I muttered. Matteo's mouth fell open, then closed, then opened again. You what? It was an accident, I rushed on. I was nervous. I talk like the customers sometimes. It just slipped. The whole room froze. I swallowed the image of Andres's eyes closing, the way his knuckles had gone white around the empty glass. He didn't laugh. Nobody did. And you're still alive, Matteo whistled softly. Either God likes you or that man sees something he wants. I didn't like either option. You should sleep, I said, standing up abruptly. You look like you'll fall over any second. That's your gentle way of saying I look like shit, he joked. Yes, I said, exactly. He pushed himself up with a groan. I'll take the sofa. I shook my head. You take the bed. Elena. You disappeared for 2 weeks and showed up looking like a punching bag. I cut in. Take the bed. He hesitated, then nodded, too tired to argue. As he limped toward my small bedroom, he paused in the doorway. Hey, he said quietly. Whatever this is, don't let them turn you into one of them. You hear me, you stay you. Something tightened behind my ribs. And who is that? He smiled, that same stubborn, hopeful smile. The one who kept me alive when Mama got sick. The one who works 2 jobs and still leaves coffee for the neighbor who can't afford it. The one who cries at stupid movies and still goes to work the next day. That one. My throat closed. Go to bed, Matteo. He nodded and disappeared into the dark. I sat back down at the table alone again. The envelope, the money, the card, they waited in front of me like choices. I picked up the card, ran my thumb over the ink until I almost expected it to smear. Any trouble, call. What counted as serious enough? My brother coming home covered in bruises because other men decided whether he lived or died. That felt serious. The fact that those same men now claimed we owed nothing, because one man in a dark suit had said my brother's name, that felt serious too. I turned the card over, blank. My phone buzzed suddenly, making me jump. A text, unknown number. Be at the restaurant tomorrow. 2 p.m. Come to the office upstairs. Hooray. No threats, no pleas, no details, just expectation. My stomach twisted. The office upstairs. I had seen the door before near the manager's office. Always closed, always locked, always guarded by a quiet man with a gun he never needed to show. I hardly slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that private room again, heard his voice, felt the weight of a word that no longer belonged to me. The next day the sun felt wrong, too bright, too clean for the kind of thing I was walking into. I wore my work clothes, black pants, white shirt, hair pulled back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have worn armor instead. At the restaurant, the staff stared more than usual. The dishwasher gave me a long look, like he was counting whether I had all my limbs. The hostess whispered something to the bartender, eyes flicking in my direction. My manager appeared from the back, wiping non-existent sweat from his forehead. You came, he said, half surprised, half relieved. He sent a message, I replied. My manager glanced toward the ceiling, as if the boss could see through flaws. They say no to him, not us. A man I didn't know waited near the back corridor, tall, clean-cut, no visible tattoos. The calm in his eyes was worse than any gun. Elena, he asked. Yes, come with me. He didn't offer small talk, he didn't check if I was ready, he just turned and walked, expecting me to follow. I did. We passed the door to La Cuva, closed now, a normal door in a not normal place. At the end of the corridor, where I had only ever gone to grab extra napkins or wine, there was another door I had never noticed before. Dark wood, no sign, just a small silver bell instead of a name. The man knocked once and opened it without waiting for an answer. Inside, the light was softer. A large window looked out over the street, the glass tinted just enough that people walking below would never guess who might be watching them. A heavy desk, a leather chair, a bookshelf with more real books than I had seen in one place since high school. No gold statues, no gaudy art, just a single black and white photograph on the wall of a woman standing by the sea, wind in her hair, turned away from the camera. Andres sat behind the desk, no jacket, sleeves rolled up, a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than my apartment. In the daylight, his features were clearer. The tiredness in his eyes looked deeper, but the lines around his mouth softened the longer he looked at me. You can go, he said to the man who had brought me. The door shut softly behind me. Suddenly, it was just us and the quiet. Sit, Elena, he said. I sat in the chair opposite him, my back straight, hands in my lap so he wouldn't see them tremble. You got home safe, he asked. The normal question from such an abnormal man made me hesitate. Yes, I said, my brother came back. He nodded once as if he already knew. Good. You did that, I said. Shay. Why? He leaned back in his chair, studying my face like it was a file he had to read carefully. Because I got tired of watching brothers die for sisters who would spend the rest of their lives paying for funerals, he said, and because he was loud about you. About me, I frowned. He kept telling them not to touch you, Andres said simply. Every time they hit him, he said your name. That kind of loyalty can't be bought, it has to be learned. Someone taught him that, you maybe. My chest tightened. I thought of Mateo in some nameless basement, bleeding and stubborn, still trying to protect me with nothing but words. You paid his debt, I said slowly, so now we owe you. He shook his head. Debts are boring, people get sloppy when they feel like prisoners. I don't want that, I want something else. The way he said it made the hairs on my arms stand up. What? He folded his hands on the desk, his fingers long, a pale scar across one knuckle. You were fast last night, he said. You listened, you wrote, you didn't interrupt, you were afraid, but you didn't run. And when you thought someone you cared about was in danger, you spoke to me like I was just a man, not a monster. That is rare. Calling you darling is rare, I said before my fear could stop my mouth. It felt more like suicidal. He almost smiled. It changed his whole face just for a heartbeat, making him look younger, less like a villain and more like a man who had once laughed easily. Words are knives and bandages, he said. Most people only know how to cut. His eyes met mine. I haven't heard that word from a clean mouth in a long time. My pulse stumbled. Clean. Unprofessional, he clarified. Uncalculated, without a price attached. He looked at the photograph on the wall for a second, then back at me. The last time it was her. I followed his gaze, the woman by the sea. Wind, hair, the distant shape of a smile I couldn't see but could feel. Your wife? I asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded once. My almost wife, she left before the church could bless it. A bullet doesn't wait for priests. Something in my chest cracked. He said it so plainly, without drama, but the weight of it pressed on the room. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it in a way that had nothing to do with my own fear. He watched me, as if measuring the depth of those two words in my mouth. I don't tell you this for pity, he said. I tell you so you understand why certain words move mountains in this world. Men here will kill for nothing, Elena, but they will also die for the very few things that still feel holy to them. He let that sit between us for a moment, then he pushed a folder across the desk toward me. There's a choice inside, he said. My fingers hesitated over the cardboard. What kind of choice? The kind that doesn't feel like one, he answered, but it is. I opened the folder. Inside there were 2 sheets of paper. On the left, a short document, my full name, my brother's, a few lines in legal language I barely understood, and then a sentence that even I could read clearly. By signing below, all debts owed by the Rivera family to the parties listed are considered null and void as of this date. At the bottom, a blank space for my signature, beside it his. On the right, another paper, a contract in simpler words. You will work directly for me, translator, assistant. You will come when I call and you will leave when I say you can. I will protect your brother and anyone who lives under your roof from the consequences of his past debts, as long as you do not betray me. There was a line for pay. It was more money than I had dreamed of seeing in my life. There was also a line that said, you can refuse. If you refuse, you keep your job downstairs. I do not chase you, but I cannot promise to watch your brother's back forever. My mouth went dry. This is insane, I whispered. Very likely, he agreed calmly. You're giving me your word in writing, I asked, a man like you. He shrugged one shoulder. Paper burns, people talk. In my world, my word is worth more than any of it, but I thought it would make you feel better. Does it? I asked myself out loud. I wasn't sure. I looked up at him. What do you really want from me? He didn't answer right away. He sat there, looking out the window for a beat, watching a bus crawl past, a woman with a stroller, a teenager on a bike, normal lives on a normal street that didn't know their city's shadow had an office above their heads. When you sit at my table, he said finally, men lie to me for money, for fear, for habit. Last night you lied badly and told the truth beautifully. I want someone in my world who still knows the difference. That sounds like a burden, I murmured. It is, he said, on both of us. Silence wrapped around us. The folder waited on the desk, heavy with more than paper. If you walk out that door now, he continued quietly, I become for you just the man who once helped your brother. A memory, a warning. You go back to small tips and small fears. Maybe that's enough, maybe that's better. His eyes locked onto mine, holding me in place. If you stay, he said, tapping the folder with one finger, I become the man responsible for whether your family lives or dies. I put a roof of my name over your head. The bullets that miss you hit me. The ones that miss me hit you. You will see things you cannot unsee. You will become someone you may not recognize. And I will expect you to look me in the eye when I start to forget I'm still human. He leaned back, giving me space and no escape at the same time. Think carefully, Elena, he said. Do you want a quiet life that can be broken by any man with a gun, or a loud one that might break you from the inside? My hand hovered over the pen on his desk. I could feel the weight of my brother sleeping in my bed, the bruises on his ribs, the envelope of cash on my kitchen table. I could feel my mother's rosary, still hanging on the nail by the door at home, and the way my heart had jumped when a man wrapped in violence had called me by my name instead of girl or waitress. My fingers closed around the pen. I lifted it from the desk as the sound of the street below faded, and for a moment there was nothing in the world but paper, ink, and the quiet, dangerous man watching to see who I would decide to become. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs strength today. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for the next story.